25. Everyday British skills. The government quietly phased out between 1960 and 1980. Nobody announced it. Nobody held a public debate. Between 1960 and 1980, a quiet sequence of regulations, bylaws, and licensing acts removed 25 skills that ordinary British families had practiced for generations and replaced them with something you needed a professional for instead. Number 25. How to ride a motorcycle without a crash helmet. Before 1973, British motorcyclists rode bareheaded as a matter of personal choice. A cap, a scarf, experience and attention were the protection most used. The Motorcycle Crash Helmets Regulations Act 1973 made wearing helmets compulsory. The decision was no longer yours to make. It was the first time the law reached inside a personal risk and made the choice for you. It would not be the last. Number 24. How to operate a CB radio from your home or car. Citizens band radio, short-range two-way communication between ordinary people, was illegal in Britain until 1981. While the rest of the world chatted freely on CB, British authorities treated unlicensed transmission as a criminal matter. The Post Office Act, 1969, and its predecessors gave authorities the power to seize equipment and to prosecute users. Thousands used it anyway. Hundreds were prosecuted. The skill of communicating without permission was treated as a threat. Number 23. How to lend money to neighbors without a license. Informal lending between neighbors, a few pounds to cover a gap, repaid when the wage came in, was how working communities managed before banks reached everyone. The Consumer Credit Act 1974 introduced licensing requirements for credit arrangements. Informal lending became legally ambiguous overnight. A community that had always looked after its own was told it needed authorization to do so. Number 22. How to keep an exotic animal without a license. A chimpanzee in a back garden, a large snake in a front room, a wildcat on a lead in a market town. All were legal and all happened across Britain through the 1960s, the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. 1976 introduced licensing requirements for keeping specified species. The era of the back garden exotic ended. The animals were not more dangerous in 1977 than they had been in 1975. The paperwork simply arrived around them. Number 21. How to practice herbal medicine and sell it to your neighbors. Every village had someone who knew which plant treated which complaint. Elderberry for fever, comfrey for sprains, valerian for sleep, knowledge passed down without a certificate. The Medicines Act 1968 introduced licensing requirements for herbal remedies sold to the public. Unlicensed practitioners could no longer legally sell their preparations. The knowledge did not disappear. It simply stopped being passed on to anyone who might use it. Number 20. How to teach your children at home without formal registration. Home education existed in Britain before compulsory schooling, and it continued throughout the 20th century. Parents who taught their children at home were largely left alone. Local authority enforcement tightened through the 1970s, requiring parents who withdrew children from school to formally register and justify the arrangement. The right remained. The freedom to exercise it quietly did not. Every street in Britain once had a woman who sold jam, bread, or pickles from her front door. It supplemented an income. It fed a neighborhood. Food safety legislation through the 1960s and 1970s made selling homemade food without a licensed premises increasingly difficult. The women who could not afford a licensed kitchen stopped selling. The street lost something it never got back. Number 18. How to set a snare for rabbits on common land. Rabbit was a free source of protein for working families. A wire snare, correctly set at a run entrance, cost nothing and kept a family in meat. Land access restrictions and local enforcement through the 1960s and the 1970s made snaring on common land increasingly difficult. The rabbit still runs the same paths it always ran. The knowledge of where to put the snare has nearly gone. Number 17. How to collect medicinal plants from hedgerows and use them yourself. Self-medication from the hedgerow was not fringe knowledge in 1960s Britain. It was what the generation before the NHS had always done. The Medicines Act, 1968, drew a firm line between licensed medicine and folk remedy. Ordinary knowledge became legally ambiguous overnight. The hedgerow still holds everything it always held. The permission to use it was quietly withdrawn. Number 16, how to build a small outbuilding without planning permission. A garden shed, a coal store, a small extension built by hand over a weekend without forms or fees. Skilled men built their own, neighbors helped. The Town and Country Planning Act 1968 and subsequent extensions brought more structures under formal planning control through the 1970s. The ability to build something with your own hands on your own land became conditional on paperwork. The paperwork came first. Number 15, how to repair cars on your own driveway and charge neighbors for it. Backstreet, mechanics, men who fix cars on weekends for cash, kept working families mobile when no one could afford a garage. Vehicle repair and business licensing regulations tightened through the 1970s, pushing informal repair operations off private drives and public streets. The man who could fix anything for half the price was told he needed a license to do what he already knew. Number 14, how to collect and burn your own wood from common land. Gathering fallen wood or cutting approved quantities from managed common land was an ancient right that supplemented coal in working households. Common land access regulations and forestry bylaws tightened through the 1960s and the 1970s, restricting wood collection across much of England and Wales. The wood still falls. The right to collect it quietly disappeared. Number 13, how to brew strong beer at home and share it freely. Home brewing for personal consumption was legalized in 1963, but supplying it commercially remained tightly controlled. The law gave with one hand. Customs and excise regulations kept informal community brewing, the kind that had fed village gatherings for centuries, firmly out of reach. You could brew it. You could not sell it. You could barely give it away without checking the rules first. Number 12, how to practice as an informal midwife in your community. Before the full professionalization of maternity care, experienced older women assisted at births in their communities. They had delivered dozens of babies without a certificate. The Nurses, Midwives and Health Visitors Act, 1979, formalized the profession entirely. Unregistered attendance at a birth became illegal. The women who had done it for 30 years stopped. The knowledge they carried stopped with them. Number 11, how to repair electrical wiring in your own home. In the 1960s, a competent householder rewired a room, fitted a socket, and changed a fuse board without a professional. The knowledge passed from father to son on a weekend afternoon. Insurance requirements and landlord regulations through the 1970s shifted the cultural expectation. Do it yourself. Electrical work became something you quietly stopped doing. The wire was the same wire. The man who knew how to connect it was told increasingly that he should not. Number 10, how to keep bees without registering with anyone. Beekeeping in a back garden was an ordinary hobby in the 1960s in Britain. A hive, a veil, and a smoker. No forms, no inspections, no registration, foul-brood disease controls, and local authority. Regulations introduced through the 1970s began requiring notification and inspection of hives in many areas. The bees did not change. The paperwork arrived around them. Number 9, how to collect scrap metal and sell it without a license. The rag and bone man was still a working figure in the early 1960s. He collected what families could not use and gave it value. The Scrap Metal Dealers Act, 1964, introduced licensing requirements that made informal collection and trading progressively more difficult. An entire informal economy, one that recycled everything the formal economy discarded, was licensed out of existence within a generation. Number 8, how to run a street market stall without a permanent license. Informal street trading with a trestle table, a basket, and a few hours on a Saturday was how working people supplemented their incomes in British towns. Street trading bylaws tightened progressively through the 1960s and the 1970s, requiring permanent pitch licenses and pushing informal sellers off the street. The woman with the basket knew every customer by name. The license requirement did not ask for that. Number 7, how to distill your own spirits for home use. Home distilling, producing a small quantity of spirits from surplus fruit or grain, was practiced quietly in British households for centuries. The Customs and Excise Management Act 1979 made any home production of spirits illegal without a license. Every country in the world has its home spirit. Britain made it illegal and forgot it had ever had one. Number 6. How to collect wild birds' eggs as a naturalist. Egg collecting was a common pursuit for British boys and naturalists into the mid-20th century, a direct way of learning the countryside and the species within it. The Protection of Birds Act, strengthened significantly through the 1960s, made collecting the eggs of most wild species an offense. The knowledge of habitats, nesting seasons, and species that egg collecting produced went with it. Number 5. How to treat a wound or set a minor fracture at home without a doctor. Self-reliance in minor medical matters was the ordinary expectation of families who could not easily afford a doctor. The NHS, combined with growing professional pressure on self-treatment, shifted that knowledge away from the household and toward the clinic. The knowledge did not become illegal. It became unnecessary, and then it became lost. Number 4. How to take a child out of school for a week to teach them something useful. Before attendance enforcement tightened, a week away from school to help with the harvest, learn a trade, or accompany a parent was common and largely tolerated. Education Act enforcement through the 1970s made unauthorized absence a formal offense. The child who spent a week learning to build, grow, or mend came back knowing something the school had not planned to teach. That week was quietly closed off. Number 3. How to run an unlicensed lodging house from your own home. Taking in a lodger was how working-class women supplemented household income for generations. No license, no inspection, an agreement between adults. Housing regulations through the 1960s and the 1970s introduced registration requirements that made informal lodging legally complex. The spare room was still there. Using it without paperwork became a risk most families would not take. Number 2. How to burn coal in a city without asking for permission. Coal fires heated every working-class home in Britain before the Clean Air Acts changed the landscape permanently. The Clean Air Act, 1956, introduced smoke control areas. By the 1970s, burning ordinary coal in designated urban areas was an offense. Smokeless fuel was sold instead. The fire was the same fire. The coal that fed it for 200 years became illegal in the cities where most people lived. Number 1. How to do things yourself. The one habit every regulation forgot to replace. Every skill on this list was regulated for a reason. Public safety, professional standards, environmental health. The reasons were often legitimate. What was never considered in any of the acts or bylaws or regulations was what would be lost alongside the risk. Not just the skill, the confidence that came with it. The knowledge that a problem in your home, your street, your community was yours to solve. With your own hands, your own judgment, and what you already knew. That was not banned by any specific law. It was simply made unnecessary, one regulation at a time, until the generation that had it was gone. And the generation that followed never knew it had been there.